Coming up on today's Locked On Bucks, we take a look back at the weekend, an impressive win. I know it sounds crazy, but an impressive win against the Washington Wizards, and looking ahead to the rest of the week, starting tonight with a matchup in Chicago against the Bulls. Camille and I dig into that next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making this your first listen of the day. And to those of you that have subscribed and checked out the Locked On Bucks newsletter as well, start your day with the all-new free Locked On Bucks newsletter. To get in on the mix, sign up at lockedondaily.com. That is lockedondaily.com to get your day started with the all-new and free Locked On Bucks newsletter. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Camille, going back to Saturday, the Bucks beat the Washington Wizards, and I mentioned this on the air. Shout out to Josh Maurer, who filled in the last few games for Dave Kane, to Josh, and that, look, if the 30,000-foot viewer, or whatever the analogy is, if you said, hey, the Bucks are going to be up 20 plus in this game against the Wizards, everybody would have said, duh. Right. If I told you, okay, Giannis and Damian Lillard are not playing, then you kind of get the, really? Okay, that's interesting. And I just came away very impressed that it's a Wizards team that has just 4 wins on the season. So even without those guys, I think the Bucks were still favored by 8.5, but we've seen those games slip away, and it's 60 points of production that's taken off the court. So one guy gets hot for the Wizards or something starts to go wrong, it can be like quick stand and really start to spiral on you. But the Bucks didn't do that. And there were a couple of individual players that were a big reason behind that. But to me, what stood out was, I don't know, other than opening night in Philly, if there's another game you would look at and say, man, like top to bottom, everybody was pretty good in this game.
It was one of those games too. And when I saw the starting lineup announced for this game and saw it was Ryan Rollins, I was like, okay, we're doing something a little bit different as well, because we haven't seen much of Ryan since he had the shoulder injury and all the talk that came up about like, hey, like he can play, but he probably is going to need surgery as well. So if he chooses to play through it, like he's playing through something, it's not going to heal without the surgery. So seeing him get the starting nod was interesting. And of course, I mean, the main story from the Wizards game was Bobby Portis, because once I heard that there was no Dame, there was no Giannis, I actually went to that game with a few friends who were in town, the Christmas holidays and everything like that. And heading to the game, everyone said, wait, no Dame, no Giannis at all? And I was like, well, hopefully we get a Bobby game. Hopefully we can chant Bobby, Bobby, Bobby quite a few times in this game. And Bobby Portis really put that on for the Bucks. He started off super hot, like 9 to 10 from the field, really carried the load offensively. And as you mentioned, it's a Bucks team that was missing a lot of scoring. So it was going to have to be a group effort. And another thing I really loved from this Wizards game was seeing that Chris Middleton played and started. Second night of a back-to-back, and we got Chris Middleton playing, which I thought was a huge positive to come out of this game as well.
Yeah, like not to bury the lead, but Chris Middleton, right? We saw the injury report Saturday morning, and you saw probable, and that's when it was, okay, all right, let's see if this becomes the trend. But we, as mentioned, 60 points were out of the lineup with essentially with no Giannis and Damian Lillard. So often we've had the conversation like during games on the broadcast and on the pregame show of Giannis is playing fantastic, but who's going to be the secondary scorer?
Yep.
And consistently do that. And Saturday night it was, who's going to be the primary scorer and then who's going to take over that secondary role? And that guy was Bobby Portis. And Camille, there are 2 players that have really drawn a lot of attention for the wrong reasons in this communal space that we share here. And I think one of them has been very good in the opportunities he has been given, and the other has gotten better and better, and really, I think, started to find what his role and his niche with this specific group of players is along the way. And the latter is obviously Bobby Portis. I don't think they win the game without Bobby Portis and what he did, because it's not just the 34 points that he scored, the fact that he had a career high in 8 assists.
Yep.
And was too short of a triple-double. And Doc Rivers even said after the game, I wish Dame wouldn't have told him, hey, Bob, you're 2 assists short of a triple-double, because I feel like he was starting to hunt it towards the end, and that's when it didn't happen. But it wasn't just the points. It was like the phases and areas where the points came from that, as we mentioned, top to bottom, it felt like everybody was impactful. Bobby Portis gave them a huge offensive boost early when they needed it most. And in the third quarter, it was Chris Middleton. In the fourth quarter, you found somebody else, but he just played within the game and kind of set the table and said, okay, I'll get it started here. Somebody else jump in and take over.
And they needed that early, because Jordan Poole always seems to love playing home in Milwaukee. He got off to a fantastic start to the game. I think he had 13 points,
5 of 6 in the first quarter on threes.
Yeah, like he was hooping in the first quarter to the point where you hear the audience going, "Oh, like not again! Like, don't leave him again."
Games, yeah.
The oohs and ahs of like, nah, we don't want this guy to cook right now. But Bobby kept answering. He kept finding the answer, because that first quarter, when you're looking at it and you're like, okay, you're able to score the ball, because after the first quarter it was tied 36 all. And it's like, you're scoring the ball, but like, can you get some stops? In addition to the Bucks still being able to find the ways offensively in the second quarter, what really impressed me too was the fact they were able to get more stops along the way and hold the Wizards to only 14 points in that second quarter. Where after the first quarter, it was looking like, are we really going to end up in a shootout with the Wizards here on the second half of back-to-back for the Bucks? And it was like this kind of uncomfortable of like, how is this game going to, roll out? And as it continued, you're like, okay, the Bucks are picking it up without Dame, without Giannis. But to your point about Bobby's assists, they were without 2 of their biggest playmakers, with no Giannis and no Dame out there. We knew what Chris Middleton would do coming into the game, trying to have the pace for him. But it was also really good to see him knocking down the threes, like 4 or 6 from 3 for Chris Middleton, the most threes we've seen him take in the game since his return this season, with the best field goal percentage from 3 as well. So it was a really good game to see Chris and Bobby kind of hold down the fort and have other guys show up in meaningful moments as well.
Yeah. You had 5 players scoring double figures. Bobby, obviously the biggest. Chris in that third quarter, I think 11 of his 18 came there, and I don't know that he missed a shot in the third.
I don't think
Ryan Rollins, though, another name that we haven't touched on, that I do want to spend a little more time on Ryan Rollins, because of basically picking up where he left off in that Raptors game with a pretty significant injury in between there. So what we saw from Ryan Rollins, and a lot of the chatter, as you would imagine, immediately shifted to, man, should this guy be in front of players X, Y, and Z? So we'll get into that conversation coming up next here on Locked On Bucks. Well, time to talk to you now about Skylight Frames, as it is that time of year. Maybe you're scrambling to find the perfect gift for the holidays. You don't have much time left. Gift giving might not be your love language. You overthink it and you wind up with something disappointing or nothing at all, or you're buying for someone who may have everything and tough to please, or you're just tired of wasting your money on useless clutter that no one needs. That is where we have the perfect gift for you this holiday. Skylight Frame. It's a touch screen digital photo frame your whole family will love. You can upload thousands of photos with your phone and watch them appear in seconds. Takes less than 60 seconds to set up. Only takes a tap on your phone to send new photos to a frame across the country. It is the fastest, easiest way to keep loved ones in the loop. They'll feel so much more connected to you. And photos are displayed in HD resolution. You can choose from 5 different frame styles, set it up in portrait or landscape mode. And now is a special limited time offer for our listeners. Get $20 off your purchase of a Skylight frame when you go to skylightframe.com/NBA. That is SKYLIGHTFRAME. Skylightframe.com/NBA. Get $20 off your purchase now at skylineframe.com/NBA. Ryan Rollins got the start on Saturday night, and we saw him in garbage time against the Cavs, and I believe we saw one other time since then. So for all intents and purposes, this is really the first time we had seen meaningful Ryan Rollins minutes since the Raptors game and that shoulder injury. And I mean, we mentioned and kind of joked about he picked up right where he left off, but he literally picked up where he left off. I think the stat line was nearly identical to what he did in that start against the Raptors. The only difference was he didn't have 5 steals. But, man, this is a guy, Camille, that I think a lot of us were somewhat hesitant early on, and a few pointed out, hey, I know it's garbage time, but I like what I'm seeing in the minutes from Ryan Rollins here. And when we got our first glimpse at him in that Raptors game in extended minutes, like, okay, I can see those things that they're pointing out. I'm telling you, if he's going to hit shots, it's going to be an interesting conversation. I'm still not ready to say, yeah, he's moved past Delon Wright or he's moved past some of these other guys that are in front of him because, in fairness, we haven't seen him do it in the playoffs. We've seen Delon Wright do this in the playoffs. But I think what stands out to you is Ryan Rollins is certainly a willing shooter and a capable shooter, whereas that's not what Delon Wright is on the floor for. And I think at times you see some of that too, where it's okay. We made a lot out of can you play Ajax and Giannis together, but Delon Wright is kind of in the same group where what you're getting defensively, but he's just not going to shoot on the perimeter. And even when we've seen him put the ball on the floor and attack, it's been an adventure at times. That is not the case with Ryan Rollins, that he looks very comfortable adding things like that floater and certainly the shooting that you've seen enough defensively in his size to know this guy has some tools there. And if he's going to hold up, it's certainly going to be a conversation to monitor as the season moves on of how much time has he earned.
He also seems like he's just really comfortable with the ball in his hands. He's comfortable initiating the offense. He's comfortable getting guys set up. And after the Cavaliers loss, I believe it was, where Giannis was talking about, like, we need another point guard. Like, no Dame out there. Like, you need another point guard on the floor to help get you set up. Like, yes, Chris can definitely initiate. Chris can play make. Chris can get us in position. But, like, we need a point guard. Like, Chris is not a point guard.
Yeah,
he can help.
Doc, I have to do everything.
Right,
put a point guard in the lineup.
Right, but he's like, that's not what he is. So I thought it was really interesting. Like, after that, you do see Ryan Rollins reinserted back into the lineup. And honestly, after that Raptors game, I was really excited to keep seeing what Ryan Rollins could be because of the potential that he flashed there. And to your point about what we've gotten from the Delon Wright experience so far, offensively, I've been left a little bit underwhelmed by what we've gotten from him offensively. And it's not as if I came in thinking that he was going to have a huge role.
Be at 15 points a game night. Yeah.
Right. Like, that wasn't even the role I thought for him. But it just seems that when he, as you said, it's an adventure sometimes with Delon Wright when he has the ball in his hands, and Ryan Rollins comes through and it's like, okay, I just want to see more of what this could be, because you don't want to judge on a small sample size, but like, it looks good so far. So let's see what happens when it's more minutes associated with it as well. And for Ryan Rollins, I just want to point out the fact that I love that the Bucks seem to be using those two-way slots and trying to find guys who can contribute to the team in a way that could be meaningful, even if not this season, just looking forward ahead of what they can do, thinking of how that's how AJ Green, found his spot on this team. And now you have a Ryan Rollins who's also just flashing some interesting potential. Like, I personally want to see more Ryan Rollins, and I was so disappointed when he got hurt initially. Yeah. But if he's going to be playing through it, I do hope that he's able to establish a part in the rotation going forward.
When you mentioned the two ways that have really blossomed and you found something there, that's winning on the margins too. Yep. Like when we talk about the Heat and the Raptors and other teams that have found the Warriors, when you look at some of those guys that have started on two-way deals and landed elsewhere, that's going to be important for a team that has the contract structure that the Bucks have. And also, I think you failed to mention Liam Robbins, who we're all very, very high on. But and again, we're a quarter or a third of the way into the season, so there's still a lot left to be seen. And as Cube points out, and I'm sure this is the feeling of many others, you mentioned you've been underwhelmed with the offense of Delon Wright so far, but he asked, what have we seen from Delon Wright? Went 2 of 3 in free agent signings this season. I mean, look, I guess I would counter with would you rather have Delon Wright or Campaign? I know it's easy to look at, well, Campaign could shoot and run the offense. Sure. Campaign can't play in the playoffs. And the Bucks needed an insurance policy. And maybe that was the thought behind the signing too, is we really like some things that we've seen with Ryan Rollins. Maybe he can develop this year, but we also need the safeguard. We need to protect ourselves. So we need somebody else that's going to help us out there. Delon Wright was very good in that series against the Celtics, and this wasn't years ago. This was in the spring. Delon Wright has postseason experience, and you brought in Delon Wright for your defense. You didn't bring in Delon Wright, as you pointed out, Camille, to be scoring 15 or 10 points a night. So it's too early to say, well, this has been a waste. And also the thing I would counter with is it was a veteran minimum contract. Like, we can't get caught up in this thing where everybody is going to be an immediate contributor and a great contributor because of that. Like, it still wasn't a position of strength for the Bucks. You basically had the lowest amount to offer to all of these guys. Two of them have worked out fantastically so far. Delon Wright has been fine. And I think this is exactly what you should expect to get with a veteran minimum signing.
I think the best part of the offseason the Bucks had with their free agent additions, outside the fact we only had minimum. So to get TP, to get Gary, to get Wright on those minimums, as we've talked about ad nauseum, was a huge, positive for this Milwaukee Bucks team. And we've been seeing the results pay off with Taurean Prince, who has been thrusted into a larger role than many expected because of Chris Middleton's injury to start the season. Gary Trent got off to the slow start offensively. Yeah. He's starting to find his way now coming off the bench for the Bucks. And Wright has flashed defensively. It's just the offense piece of it. But the best part of the signings is that I felt like it gave this Bucks roster a little bit more room for error, in the sense of that there are a lot of young wings and guards on this Milwaukee Bucks team. We spent a lot of time in the offseason talking about, is it going to be Andre Jackson Jr. or AJ Green? Could Chris Livingston show out? Like, what can you expect from the rookies this year? I know, Justin. I know Chris Livingston. I know. But it was one of those things, like, we were expecting a lot of them, but having these veteran free agents came in, took some of that pressure off of needing them to perform immediately, where it's like, okay, we can have competition for these spots, for the rotation. And if the young guys aren't ready, we can lean on these veteran players. And Doc has talked about how he likes the roster construction to be a good mix of young guys and vets, for that reason, to have that push in the pool between them, of the competition of wanting to get on the floor. And we saw Doc start the season off leaning on those veterans a bit more. Then we saw the young guys kind of come in, get into the rotation, crack that rotation, get in, and really hold their spot down with AJ Green and Andre Jackson Jr. in particular. I thought we were seeing that with Ryan Rollins a bit, where Doc even said, like, yeah, he's our backup point guard. Yeah. He has jumped Delon Wright in the rotation now. He gets hurt, and now you have to go through the whole dance again of like, okay, let me re-earn my playing time. Let me make sure that I'm back in this rotation, because the rotation continued on evolving while he was out dealing with that injury before, it was safe for him to come back and play through it. So for Ryan Rollins, I think it's just a good opportunity for him. And these games, when you are missing your stars, they're great opportunities to be able to come in and show your coaching staff, like, hey, like, I can really play. I can do this. I would love to get more minutes. Like, fine, I'm going to make you find more minutes for me based on how I'm playing. And I think Ryan Rollins is doing that. Not saying I'm expecting Ryan Rollins to get 30 minutes consistently like he did in this game with the injuries affecting the rotation, but I think he's shown like a good 10 minutes at least. Like, just see what he got that night and see how he can keep that consistently.
Yeah, and your point, I think, is a good one about suddenly a surplus that the Bucks have, like all of a sudden being in the spot where, hey, this is a good problem to have. When we think back to last year, of you really, I mean, the lineup is the lineup. We don't really have any other options in terms of what we can play. And this year we're talking about, can we find more time for Ryan Rollins? Marjon Beauchamp has looked okay in the spots that they put him into. And I know Marcus Johnson, when I was on his show, he remains very high and says, look, I think there's something here. If they continue to work with him and give him some time, I think he's going to give them some things that they're looking for. AJ and Dre, we've seen as well, giving you that contribution. So it's just a much better spot that this roster is in as a whole. Look, it's still in the second apron, but as we'll get into the conversation as the year progresses, I don't think they're going to be in the second apron next year for a number of reasons, but the roster just seems to fit this year. And if the conversation that we're having is, yeah, Delon Wright hasn't been as good or as impactful as, you've seen from Taurean Prince and Gary Trent Jr., but we have other guys in front of him that have been, and it's not an issue. That's a very good problem to have versus Delon Wright. Yeah, man, we still feel pretty thin, and this was a veteran minimum signing, and we really need you to be the Delon Wright with the Wizards a couple of years ago. Then you're in trouble. So, look, I get being underwhelmed. As you said, that's how you feel offensively, and I think that's been the takeaway from the 3 signings. Everybody hated Gary Trent Jr. for 2 weeks, and then they realized it's a shooting slump. He's going to break out of it. He's going to give you what you expected to see. Taurean Prince has been fantastic and frankly has probably played too much, that it's a good thing now that Chris Middleton is back, that you can start to ease him off a bit. But, the Delon Wright piece, look, it's the backup point guard for a team that has Giannis, Damian Lillard, and Chris Middleton. So it's not a huge, heavy lift you're asking from him. So of the 3, if one of them was going to underwhelm or struggle, ideally it would be that one. And I think that's what we've seen.
Yeah, I think so as well. And to your point about how the team is constructed, you really feel the absence of that quote unquote backup point guard when one of the big 3 isn't available. And we've talked ad nauseum about that as well, where it's like, well, if we get into the playoffs and you're not fully healthy at the top, you're going to really struggle no matter how you try to configure the rest of the lineups, because that's how this team was constructed. It's constructed to lean heavily on what Dame can do, what Giannis can do, what Chris can do, which is, again, why even a win against a Wizards team that hasn't won many games, when you're doing that without Dame and without Giannis, 2 really big pieces of this team, it's impressive. And I think that the way that this roster is constructed, we've talked about it, it makes a lot more sense this year than it did last year. But again, that's part of the fun part of the regular season, I think, is seeing how the rotations continue to evolve, seeing what guys are popping out, seeing what guys are establishing themselves as like, hey, like I can be a consistent player for this team. So like, give me that opportunity and see what I can do with it. I think the Marjan piece is interesting. I love that Marcus is still like really waving the flag of like, he can really do something for this team if opportunity strikes. And I think throughout the season, we're going to see opportunities where he gets more extended playing time, because again, it's a long year. There are going to be nights where everyone's not available to play. I mean, even going into this Bulls game tonight, where it's like Giannis is questionable and then you got Dame is doubtful. So like it's another game where you might not have your two of your big dogs out there on the court. So who else is going to step up for the squad?
Yeah, we'll get into that injury report and the matchup with the Bulls in just a minute here, because it's going to be an interesting one. So we'll preview that matchup in front of the Bucks tonight in Chicago, and the scheduling quirk again that I think they had not quite as more extreme, I should say, last year, but an interesting wrinkle to the schedule for the Bucks. We'll discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Bucks. This next segment of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Built Rewards. If you're a renter, listen up. This is a total game changer, because thanks to Built, you can now earn points on rent payments, just like you do with groceries or travel. Paying rent now comes with serious perks, and it is completely free to join. Earn valuable Built points on your rent and everyday spending at no extra cost. You can redeem those points towards flights, hotel stays, and even future rent payments. With over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels in their program, the possibilities are endless. Access unique experiences that are exclusive to Built members and start earning now on your rent. If you're already paying, by going to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnba. That is joinbuilt.com/lockedonnba. Built, BILT. Make sure you use our link so they know we sent you. Don't wait. Start earning rewards today. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel has many ways to pick up a win, with individual players that can score a touchdown, how many points each team will score. It's all very thrilling. You can take a look starting tonight with the Green Bay Packers hosting the New Orleans Saints, looking to punch their ticket to the playoffs. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. That is FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more. with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So I don't remember if it was after or before, but Saturday night, Doc was asked about the game, that is. Doc was asked about Dame and seemed to indicate there's a good chance he's going to play Monday, but we don't think it's going to extend past that. So not Monday, whenever our next game is. I know it's not on Christmas is the way that Doc phrased it. You mentioned the injury report. He's doubtful for tonight. I mean, look, that's going to equate to 8 days of no game action then for Damian Lillard, 9 days. Not a bad thing to work in here, especially at this point in the season, especially since we know the Bucks, and not just the Bucks, all those teams put a lot into winning the NBA Cup. So, all right, we'll be extra cautious with you because that is something that Dame has experienced in the past too with that specific injury. So I think you approach this game assuming Dame doesn't play. It sounds like Giannis is going to play. Chris Middleton is probable once again, so he's becoming the Iron Man of this group. And it's a Bulls team, Camille, that I know they beat the Celtics. When was that? Thursday night. They then lost to the Celtics Saturday night, where it was kind of things falling back into place. And it's a Bulls team that it's still too early to have this conversation, but it is very clear what their intentions are for the season. And unfortunately for the Bulls, it's the opposite of musical chairs, where you have too many chairs out there and teams that are trying to not sit in a chair. When we talk about teams that are trying to miss the playoffs and increase their playoff lottery odds here. So I'm curious to see how the Bulls look. I know the Bucks have played them since that second game of the year, and it's been a much different Bulls team progressively through these past few weeks.
It has been. I think it was Cam Johnson on Old Man and the Three, that used to be JJ Redick's podcast platform, but now it's just like a cycling rotation, different players. And he came through and talked about what it's like to be on a rebuilding team and what that does to you mentally. And it was a very interesting clip. I would recommend anybody to go out there and check it out. But he was saying it's you're trying to focus on a team goal. He says the best teams have like that team buy-in where you know what your goal is and you're going towards it. He said in rebuilding situations, it gets a little bit more murky because you have guys who are looking for contracts. You have guys who are looking over their shoulder because they're hearing their name in trade rumors. It's a lot harder sometimes to really keep those units together and connected because there's just a lot of things going on outside, and you might not feel as if the front office has the same goal in mind as you do as a player, and what kind of conflict that can cause. And for the Bulls, they are a team right now that they have a lot of different guys whose names are being brought up in different trade rumors. Zach LaVine has been a really hot one for the last few years, but it seems like this is the year where things might shake for them and how they're looking to probably just start this team over. The Bulls have felt to me for a while like the Herb Cole Bucks, in the sense of like, we're just going to try to be 8 seed. Well, now it's a play-in team for this Bulls team. Like, we just kind of want to be kind of competitive, but we're not really ready to tear it all down yet. So it'll be interesting to see if they do that. But heading into tonight's matchup against the Bucks, it's a Bulls team that got embarrassed, by the Celtics on that replay after they had the high of beating the Celtics. I'm sure they're going to be coming in looking to get, a little bit of their lick back in the sense of trying to get back on the winning track. But it's a Bulls team that's going through a lot. They're shooting a lot of threes. They're trying to play really fast, but the defense isn't there for them. So it's a matchup I think that should go in the Bucks' favor, even if they are a little bit shorthanded.
Yeah, and having Giannis, which we assume is going to be the case, should help a lot. As we mentioned, they've played since the first matchup. It was a Bucks team that was certainly headed in the right direction that second meeting, and it's just a much different team with or without Giannis than what we saw early in the season for the Bucks. Speaking of the Bulls, too, I'd be remiss to not bring this name up because he was at the Wizards game covering it, and he's been at a handful of games this season. I always catch up with him whenever he is at the arena. But we talked at length on Saturday night and brought up a lot of old names because Drew Gooden is the color analyst for the Wizards TV broadcast. So that prompted a walk down memory lane. Charles Gardner, the old Bucks beat writer, who caught up with Drew Gooden before the game. And then Charles and I were talking for a while about some of those Bucks teams from the late 2000s and early 2010s, and his memories and experience of those teams, and a lot of Bulls mentions and a lot of crossover between players that played for the Bucks and the Bulls, and a lot of Scott Skiles stories that should probably remain off the air that were shared from Charles. So always great to catch up with him. And I mentioned it's an interesting stretch of the schedule here, because last year it was basically the entire month of December, from late November until like this week, the Bucks were at home, save for that one game that was in Vegas against the Pacers. Because you had like I want to say it was a 6-game homestand. You had the Vegas game. You came back for another game or another couple of games, something like that, where it was quite a bit of time, 3 weeks basically, that the Bucks were able to stay in Milwaukee. It's not quite as extreme now, but the Bucks basically don't leave home until the day before New Year's Eve, starting Saturday. Like they got back into town Saturday morning from Cleveland. Then you played the Wizards Saturday night. You had the day off Sunday. You play tonight, but it's a bus ride down to Chicago. Then you have 2 days off, and your next game is at home against the Brooklyn Nets. Then you have a day off, another bus ride down to Chicago to take on the Bulls. And then the next day you'll leave to go to Indiana to play the Pacers. So it's not as much as last year, but it is worth noting, hey, you got basically 10 days where you get to sleep in your own bed and don't leave outside of a 90-minute trip on the bus to a city.
And this is the game where this is the last Bucks game before Christmas. And there's been a lot of conversation around the Bucks not having a Christmas Day game and what that means and the slight.
So what do you think about that? Because I would just say, look, I don't necessarily agree with it. And I think the Thunder have a stronger case. But
argument, yeah.
Actions have consequences, and you lost in the first round 2 years in a row.
That's how I feel about it. It's like I get both sides, but I get why the NBA did not do it. But I also get the players of being like, and Giannis's point of like, yo, look, I was the top vote getter for All-Star game last year amongst the whole league. Dame was an All-Star starter. You won a 3-point contest. We have the star power. We've been consistently winning over the last 6 years. It's just that the playoff record, and people always put so much stake on the playoff. So I get it. But I also don't mind the fact that the players feel slighted by that. So I would love for them to come out thinking like, okay, well, we don't play on Christmas. This is the last time that we are going to be seen by the league before Christmas. We don't get a game until the 26th. So let's come out here and put on our Christmas Day game. Like, let's show out. Let's blow these guys out. Let's have a really good game. I would love for them to take some of that anger of not playing on Christmas and, guiding it into the game and just really trying to get theirs, because it's a Bulls team in Chicago, bus ride down there. They're not going to roll over. Like, while the defense might not be all the way there, as we saw earlier in the season, if you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. So like, you cannot let teams hang around despite what you might think about how they're constructed or their talent level. So I think for the Bucks, this is going to be their Christmas Day game. So like, make something of it.
Yeah. And it's one of 14 games being played across the NBA tonight. So no games played tomorrow on Christmas Eve. The league takes that day off. You have the 5 games on Christmas Day. So it's a spot we haven't been in since 2017, Camille, where if you don't play on Christmas Day, this is a decent little break that you get here, since you won't be playing on Christmas Eve either. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how both of these teams come out, because as you mentioned, this is like a Christmas Day game for the Bulls, and this is the last look for the Bucks. So curious to see that. And again, assuming there's no Dame Lillard, but we do think Giannis is going to play, what that means for this Bucks group. We'll get into more conversation on some of those young guys as we move along here. And the one thing we didn't really get to, Camille, which I'm perfectly fine with, is the NBA Cup banner conversation and discourse.
Microsoft Word banner.
Come on, Camille. I think we both have shared our thoughts on that. Look, it's identical to the division and conference championship banners. So
minimal design.
Fine with it. Candidly, I'm not quite sure what our schedule is going to be for the week, since Christmas falls right in the middle of the week. We will have an episode on tomorrow for the post-game show. Obviously, we'll have an episode Friday, the post-game of the Nets, but Wednesday and Thursday still trying to decide how we're going to handle that, and if Camille and I actually do get some time off for the holiday. So stay posted on that. But there will be a post-game show coming up after tonight's game against the Bulls. Thanks to everybody for tuning in today, throughout the course of the year and the past few years as well, and all the interaction that we constantly get in the comments on YouTube. And as I've mentioned, all the people that I've run into in everyday life that mention they listen to the show as well, and people I see at the arena that mention that as well. So thanks to all the everydayers out there that continue to make this show what it is. We'll be back once again tomorrow with the post game of the Bucks and the Chicago Bulls. For Camille, I'm Justin. We will talk to you then on Locked On Bucks.